In Judea and Samaria, anti-terror operations are continuing amid a spate of attacks and growing threats. Prime Minister Netanyahu visited the Jordan Valley to consider new security measures. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
Anti-terror operations are underway in Tulkarem and Tubas as security chiefs call for preventative and preemptive action to prevent a further spike in terrorist violence. The IDF, Shin Bet, and Magav forces operated in Tulkarem, killing an armed terrorist and wounding additional gunmen. They also located and destroyed an explosives laboratory, a military observation post, and a workshop for the production of munitions. Weapons were confiscated and explosives destroyed. There were no casualties to Israeli forces. In Tubas, an IDF aircraft attacked and eliminated a squad of 5 terrorists armed with explosives that posed a threat to the forces. The defense establishment is reportedly concerned about the return of suicide bombers. The security chiefs briefed the cabinet, saying that more emphasis is needed to avoid an increase in terror and another front in the war. Overnight, Israeli security forces arrested a wanted man from a hospital in Halhul who had been wounded in an attempted car bombing attack last month. Prime Minister Netanyahu held an assessment from a Jordan Valley lookout post near the Allenby Bridge, where 3 Israeli security guards were murdered this week by a Jordanian gunman.
במאבק הרב-זירתי הזה, אנחנו גם יודעים שאנחנו צריכים לאבטח ולהבטיח את גבולנו המזרחי מול ירדן. זה גבול של שלום, אנחנו משתפים פעולה עם ממלכת ירדן כדי להבטיח שהוא יישאר כזה, אבל בזמן האחרון האתגרים גדלים. יש ניסיון להבריח גם מחבלים וגם אמצעי לחימה מעבר לירדן, לתוך יהודה ושומרון ולתוך ערי ישראל. אנחנו פועלים כאן בשיתוף פעולה עם כל הגורמים כדי לעצור את הדבר הזה.
Netanyahu vowed to build a stronger barrier amid the growing rate of arms smuggling from Jordan passing through the border in the Jordan Valley.
אנחנו נפעל כאן כדי להקים מכשול רובוסטי יותר, חזק יותר נגד ניסיונות ההברחה. אנחנו עושים זאת בתיאום עם השכנים, וחשוב לנו להבטיח שהגבול הזה יישאר גבול של שלום וביטחון.
Steps called for in Judea and Samaria include boosting undercover units able to make arrests, cracking down on illegal entry into Israel, increasing technological surveillance on roads and intersections, and building a wall along the border with Jordan.
And joining us now with more on the anti-terror operations in Judea and Samaria is Dr. Eric Mandel, founder and director of the Middle East Political and Information Network. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So we're seeing an increase in attempted terror attacks. Some officials have said there are attacks being thwarted on a daily basis. I mean, what can you tell us about these anti-terror operations?
So I've been on the front lines in Judea and Samaria with the Panther Battalion in Jenin and Nablus. And what I think people don't realize, because you're on a 7-front war, is that what's gone on in the West Bank has been going on a very long time. Way before October 7th, the reason why things were under control is because Israeli forces were going in every single day and night and extracting terrorists and keeping a lid on it. And that's only because ever since the Second Intifada and Defensive Shield, Israel went back in and now operates in areas A and B. Those are the areas that Palestinians, especially A, was supposed to be in control of, but could not, Palestinian Authority. And so Israel has decided to make some major operations, the biggest that have occurred since the Second Intifada. And the answer is why? And the answer is Iran. Iran is trying to destabilize the West Bank, is trying to increase the ring of fire around Israel. You have in the north Hezbollah, in the south Hamas, you have the Houthis, you have Iraq. They're trying to destabilize Jordan, and they have definite eyes and plans on the West Bank. And Hamas is in control of many of the cities in the West Bank right now, including Tulkarem, half of Qalqilia. You're talking about horrible problems with Islamists and all their varieties, including Palestinian Islamic Jihad, but mainly Hamas, and all from Iran in Jenin, Nablus, Hebron. And so this is something that Israel has had to do, again, to keep a lid here. And interestingly enough, there's a parallel here when people talk about the day after for Gaza. This is kind of what it's going to look like. Israel is going to have to look at Gaza for years to come as Area A and go in every night and extract terrorists to keep the lid on what's going on.
A very stark reality. How do residents, what are you hearing from residents of Judea and Samaria? How do they feel in the wake of these increased threats? This has been going on for a long time, but now we're really seeing increased threats. Is there still a sense of security? Is there a deep concern for their safety?
I think the residents, the 500,000 or so Israeli citizens who live there, are concerned about the security. They're unfortunately in the United States, they're being defined by the rogue settlers, who are a very tiny minority. But most people are law-abiding people who want to just live there, and they are worried that they are not being prioritized. There is, again, a parallel. The people in the north feel that they are not being prioritized and they're not in their homes. The people in the Gaza envelope think they're not being prioritized. They think that basically the government is mainly interested in keeping quiet in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And so those people there do feel a little bit abandoned. And I think this is an important point, that Israel cannot let the West Bank get out of control. 7 fronts, this could easily turn into the major front.
So
and
that's,
you know that.
That's my next question. Is Judea and Samaria now another war front? And, how will this impact, or how is this impacting the ongoing war in Gaza and, of course, the security situation in the north, foreseeing the IDF also operating in this region?
So there are more soldiers today in West Bank than there are in Gaza, because the operations have changed. You have a situation where Israel does not have total control of its longest border, the Jordan River Valley. And because it doesn't, you're having arms, drugs, cash coming in from Iran through the Jordan River Valley. Where's it coming from? Iran. Iran bringing it through Iraq, into Syria, through northern Jordan, into Jordan to destabilize it, and into the West Bank. So in order to tie all these things together, in order to turn the West Bank into a quieter place, one of the things that has to happen is Jordan has to stop the infiltration of Iranian monies and weapons coming through there. And we in the United States have to step up here and help the Jordanians. Jordanians haven't been great in this whole war. The foreign minister has been kind of terrible in his anti-Semitic language and rhetoric ever since October. But Jordan is a linchpin here of keeping the West Bank stable.
All right, well, Dr. Eric Mandel, thank you so much for your analysis today. And of course, we'll continue monitoring what's happening in Judea and Samaria. Thank you. And the multi-front war is continuing despite Israeli warnings that it's moving toward potential war in the north. Hezbollah is stepping up its attacks from South Lebanon. It's day 342 of the war in Gaza, and a Hamas document admits that the terror force is nearly defeated. Meanwhile, a report out of Syria that Israeli security forces raided a weapons site inside Syria, removing confidential documents and equipment and capturing a number of Iranian terrorists before destroying the facility. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
In the north, Hezbollah has launched more than 100 rockets in the past 4 days. Amid Israeli threats of expanded war, the group is ramping up attacks targeting military bases, outposts, and residential areas across northern Israel. The terror group deployed swarms of attack drones and fired missile barrages daily at military outposts, bases, and northern cities in what it described as retaliation for Israeli strikes on Lebanese territory. The Air Force struck back, attacking military infrastructure of Hezbollah in the area of Al-Karbiya and rocket launchers in South Lebanon. The Mountain Brigade identified and attacked an observation post of the terror group in the Shuba area of South Lebanon. About 30 launches were detected that crossed the territory and fell into open area. There were no casualties. It's day 342 of the war in Gaza. Defense Minister Gallant revealed a document written by the former commander of Hamas's Khan Yunis brigade, Rafa Salameh. It's addressed to Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar and describes the dire situation the terror group is in. He wrote, "We have lost 90 to 95% of our rocket capabilities, some 60% of our personal weapons, 70% of our anti-tank launchers and rockets, and 50% of our fighters, those who have been martyred and wounded, and now we are left with only 25%. It went on, "The Gazan people do not tolerate Hamas anymore, broken on a mental and physical level." Meanwhile, an Israeli airstrike reportedly killed at least 14 people in a school-turned-Hamas operations center in central Gaza. The army says that terrorists were using the former UNRWA school for cover as a base for planning attacks against Israeli targets. The army says it took steps to avoid civilian casualties. The commander of the Air Force, Tomer Bar, and the commander of the Southern Command arrived at the area where the IDF Owl helicopter crashed in Gaza, killing 2 soldiers. The Air Force commander said, while performing a life-saving activity for a severely wounded soldier in the Gaza Strip, we lost 2 reservists when a helicopter from the 123rd Squadron crashed during the landing phase. 8 fighters were injured, including the female pilot. Bar added, "We hug the families." The fallen were named. They are Sergeant Major Tom Ish Shalom, 38, from Nes Harim, and Sergeant Major Daniel Alush, 37, from Tel Aviv.
Major Daniel Alush was laid to rest today. He grew up in my neighborhood. He was an alumni of the same schools my children now attend, and he leaves behind a wife and 2 very small children. Everyone who knew him says he was an incredible man, father, husband, and our community mourns his loss. The reality of war in Israel may rest in peace. And moving on, hope of reaching a hostage deal withering in a shocking turn. Hamas is suddenly showing interest in continuing negotiations. ILTV's Ariella Lechiani is in Tel Aviv now with more details. Ariella, what is new with the hostage talks? Hamas reportedly now saying it's on board with the deal?
Yes, thank you, Lidar. So the Hamas terror group has stated that they are prepared to agree to a ceasefire deal immediately based on the proposal presented by US President Joe Biden in July. Now, this is very surprising when during the last few days it seemed as though reaching a ceasefire deal was close to zero and we reached a bit of a dead end. Now, this comes after a high-level meeting was held in Doha with Qatari and Egyptian mediators and Hamas negotiators where the intention of the meeting was to try and get Hamas to ease off their most recent demands of increasing the number of Palestinian prisoners released by Israel. Now, though, of course, this seems like, progress and a step forward in terms of reaching a ceasefire deal. We have seen this time and time again. We have seen Hamas state that they're prepared to agree to a deal and then have backed out. So, though, yes, this could be a positive development, it's also one to view very apprehensively.
Absolutely, Ariella, thank you. And so-called Gazan-based journalist Amrou Abu-Rida is in fact not a journalist, but a terrorist affiliated with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine Terror Group, or PFLP, and actively participated in the October 7th massacre. Israeli Kan News revealed that Abu-Rida participated in an assault on an Israeli tank, returned to Gaza, and then infiltrated Kibbutz Nir Oz on October 7th. He filmed and was even complicit in the massacre, and his brother was one of the terrorists who participated in the kidnapping of the Bibas family. Abu-Rida was arrested by the IDF in February of 2024 in the Khan Yunis hospital, where he tried to pass off for a civilian. According to Khan, he admitted to all of this when questioned by the IDF. What's more, there is an active campaign by Hamas supporters and even by Al Jazeera to release him. Surprising? Sadly, not really. So many so-called journalists in Gaza have been found to actually be terrorists. Be careful what news you believe coming out of Gaza. And a new poll of Palestinians in Gaza shows declining support for Hamas, with growing calls for a ceasefire. More on that from ILTV's Maayan Hoffman.
A new poll by the Arab World for Research and Development suggests that if elections were held in Gaza tomorrow, Hamas would not win. The poll, which surveyed nearly 600 Gazans, shows support for Hamas is down to just 6%. Previous polls had shown that more than 50% of Gazans still supported Hamas. Meanwhile, 40% of Gazans now favor a Palestinian Authority-led arrangement once the war ends. Interestingly, 82% of Palestinians say they want elections after the conflict, but almost a third don't want either Fatah or Hamas to lead. Moreover, 74% of Gazans find it acceptable to have international or Arab supervision of the Rafah border until a permanent agreement is reached. The poll also reveals that the majority of Gazans, like the majority of Israelis, want a ceasefire. About 89% of respondents support U.S. President Joe Biden's three-phase ceasefire plan. 75% approve of a 6-week full ceasefire, and 85% back a hostage prisoner exchange involving vulnerable groups. Despite this, Gaza remains under control of the Hamas terrorist organization, leaving many Gazans skeptical about achieving any form of peace. The poll also found that 77% of Gazans believe Gaza is heading in the wrong direction.
And according to an Israeli news report, Justice Minister Levine has asked Attorney General Baharav Miara to open a criminal probe into the wartime conduct of Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant. According to Channel 12, the strange request was made in an effort to avoid a pending request by the International Court of Justice to issue them arrest warrants. ILTV's Devo Klein has the story.
Prime Minister Netanyahu reportedly wants the probe into the ongoing war and handling of the military campaign. The probe would then be closed with an updated file to the ICC, showing that charges have been investigated by Israel and therefore do not require court intervention. According to the report, Baharav Miara rejected the request, believing it would be seen as a ploy and would not satisfy the ICC. Baharav Miara has already publicly declared that only a state commission of inquiry, the highest level probe, into the Hamas-led October 7th attack and the ensuing war in Gaza would satisfy the ICC. Yesterday, Netanyahu rejected the indictment for war crimes against himself and the defense minister, claiming that they are fighting Hamas terrorism in strict accordance with the international laws of war. Netanyahu also rejected the comparison made by prosecutor Karim Khan in The Hague with Sinwar, a war criminal who executed Israeli hostages in cold blood. He called Khan's decision pure anti-Semitism and a moral disgrace of the highest order.
And now in other news, as Israel is fighting a multi-front war for its very survival, unity among the Jewish people is more crucial today than ever. Unfortunately, in Israeli society, deep divides still remain, even between secular and religious Jewish Israelis. Joining me in the studio today is Reb Adam Yitzchak and Rabbi Abraham Mordechai Gottlieb, whose life's mission is teaching the Kabbalah and spreading a message of unity, a message for which he's paid a heavy price. His Bet Midrash, or rabbinical school, was recently destroyed, and he was pushed out by his community. But he's not letting this stop him from spreading his important message, and today seeks to rebuild his school to spread this message among the younger generation. And if you want to help, you can scan the QR code on the screen now. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So, Rabbi, you're an expert on Kabbalah. You've written numerous books on the subject. Before we start, for those who may not be familiar, can you tell us briefly what exactly this is? What exactly is the Kabbalah?
The Kabbalah is the spiritual levels of every person. It's going from up, from the God himself, and down till our world. And the Kabbalah said that all the levels is according to loving each other or hating. If you are hate, you are very, very down, in a down level. And if you can love everyone, so you are in a highest level. That's the Kabbalah.
And you speak a lot about the importance of unity, as you mentioned, the importance of love. And you try to also discuss, problems within the ultra-Orthodox community and Israeli society. This seems to have upset the religious establishment. Why do you think that is?
I'm coming from the religious world, and there is no learning of spiritual in in the yeshivot, and not for boys and not for girls. And that make the religious very, very dry. And the religious is from outside and not from inside. It's not build very, very deep emotions for everyone. There is no love, there is no, the connection between people is not so deep. Everything is more from outside, not from inside. And that's make very, very big arguments between all the parts and of the Judaism.
And Rabbi Yitzhak, is there anything you would like to add to that as well?
Certainly. I think that for a long time now, we've attempted as a community to rebuild Torah and try to connect to tradition. But there's a very important, arguably the most important aspect of the tradition, the inner part of the tradition that is large in part missing. So we're very inspired to try to balance the system and speak on this necessary learning of love and coming to altruism.
I think that the main thing that there is war with us, and the anti-Semitism became more and more biggest, is because the situation between the Jews is very hard. There is a lot of arguments and a lot of wars between the Jews. And I think the main thing today is make, first of all, peace between all the parts of the Judaism. And I think the Kabbalah make it.
From the Kabbalah. And I want to talk a little bit about your Bet Midrash that was recently destroyed. You're seeking now to rebuild.
Yes.
What do you need to accomplish this? And what's your vision for the new Bet Midrash?
I want that the Bet Midrash will be general of everyone. And I have between my pupil not religious, and I have, for example, gays, and I have Orthodox, and I have from all the kinds. I think the woman's is very, very strong in spiritual. Every Shabbos I have a very beautiful lesson. 4 o'clock before the morning, sit already a lot of women's and learning seriously. And I think the women can be leaders in spiritual in Israel, in all the world.
Well, Rabbi and Reb, thank you so much for joining us today and for this very important message. And to our viewers, if you would like to help rebuild the Bet HaMidrash and help the Rabbi spread this message of unity within Israel, scan the QR code on the screen now.
Psagot Winery, where passion meets tradition. Nestled in the heart of Binyamin, our vineyards yield exquisite wines crafted with generations of expertise.
And now, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Mostly clear skies expected tonight around the country, with temperatures reaching lows of 24 degrees Celsius or 76 degrees Fahrenheit. Tomorrow, sunny skies are expected alongside hot temperatures at highs of 33 degrees Celsius or 92 degrees Fahrenheit. This weekend, temperatures will drop drastically as Israel prepares for winter. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Ladar Lazi. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.